So today we're going to do the Samsung S10e versus the P30, and these two are the lower end of the models, so let's see how they do head to head. The biggest advantage is that the P30 has the telephoto lens, whereas the Samsung does not. For the ultra wide lens, Samsung does have the bigger or more wider lens. So this is a low light front facing test for these two cameras. I'm walking on a sidewalk, nothing too special. There's a street beside me, so there's cars coming by and the street lamps above me, so yeah, just a casual city walk, nothing too dark. So let's move on to the next segment. For the front-facing camera, the Samsung really brings out the red warmth kind of too much on the regular camera mode. It tunes it down a little bit when you shoot it in portrait mode. On the Huawei, it's a bit more greenish blue and the shadows is a bit more harsher, so it looks a little bit more dramatic. As for the pictures, they both look really good, but I would say the Samsung looks more punchier. It does give a little bit more saturated look, whereas the Huawei P30 looks more neutral. For me, the color is the biggest difference between these two phones. The Huawei and Samsung do offer ultra wide angle lenses, but the Huawei isn't as wide as the Samsung. As you can tell, you can see a lot more in the Samsung picture, and it's a little bit more distorted as well. So if you really want that super wide angle lens but you don't mind the distortion, Samsung is the way to go, whereas the Huawei, it looks like a natural ultra wide lens. One of the biggest difference is the Huawei gives you a telephoto lens, so when you're zooming into things, definitely it's much sharper, versus the Samsung, it looks more digitized. 3x looks really good because it's still optical. After that, that's when it starts to degrade, but either way, it still looks better than the Samsung when you're zooming all the way in, especially when the Huawei can go all the way up to 30x digital zoom. I don't think Samsung can beat that. For HDR, it's a hit or miss for both. Sometimes the Huawei will win and sometimes the Samsung will win. In this picture, the Samsung clearly does better with the background in the windows. You can actually see the individual windows, whereas the Huawei, it's all lost. In this picture, I think the Huawei does better. If you look at the whole structure itself, it's not lost in the shadows, especially you can tell by the spikes on top. Moving down to the blue crystal, you can tell that there's a nice gradient, there's a strong light source and then it fades off, whereas the Samsung looks kind of flat. In this picture, the Samsung does better in HDR, the outside is more exposed and the inside as well, versus the Huawei, it looks really underexposed interior and pretty much overexposed exterior. So like I said before, it's a hit or miss for both phones. So throughout this whole gaming convention, I primarily used aperture mode on Huawei and live focus mode on the Samsung. Now using these modes throughout the whole day and in real life situations as well, I found myself loving the aperture mode on the Huawei way much more than the live focus mode on the Samsung. And here's why. When you're in a situation where there's a bunch of people waiting on you to take pictures or just take turns, you just want to snap and go. Now taking a picture both side by side at the same time, at the same distance, the aperture mode really picks up on the cutout of the person or people or objects, whereas the Samsung, it misses a lot of times and it always says subjects too far, get closer, and you gotta wait. And then there's the awkward moment after that where you gotta move around just to get that effect to work. So in that real life situation, I found that the aperture mode on the Huawei is just more reliable than the live focus mode on the Samsung. So I missed a lot of shots in terms of just getting a nice blurry background on the Samsung a lot, which is really disappointing for me. And if your subject is still and you got all the time in the world, then both of them work really well. But sometimes it doesn't on the Samsung. It really focuses on the face, like in this picture, the person on the left, it focuses on his face and not on the main subject that I want to shoot. So this picture is pretty much useless to me. Again, same example, on the Samsung, it focuses on the person on the back, not the main subject, which is a PC and a teddy bear. So this picture is not what I wanted and it's a missed opportunity. The great thing about Huawei's aperture mode is that you can pick your focus point during and after you take the picture. Now after seeing all these pics, I would say the Huawei is more on the cooler side and the Samsung is more on the warmer side. Now at that point, it's a personal preference which one you like better. For me, I do like the warmer tones on a Samsung when you're taking pictures of people, but when it's objects or buildings, I do like it more on the cooler side. So that's all personal preference and that's all up to you. Now moving on to low light, the same thing applies. Samsung's much more warmer and the Huawei is much more cooler. Now what I realized with these two phones, I feel like the Huawei really wants to correct the color temperature to these yellow lights we commonly have on our streets. And to the real life eye, I would say the Samsung looks much more closer than the Huawei. I just want to say that the Samsung pictures just looks more realistic because we see the yellow lights and on the Samsung pictures there is the same amount of yellow on their pictures, versus Huawei it's kind of like more on the bluish side. And the Samsung do keep its saturation. As you can tell, the red bricks, which is clearly red, and on the Huawei it kind of just becomes neutral. Now in areas where there's pretty much no light, Huawei wins hands down. Even in auto mode, to me I don't really like the night mode because for one, you do take more time taking the shot, and two, it does introduce more green tone to the whole image. So overall, in nighttime or low light, I do like the Huawei much more. As you can tell in this picture, you can see a lot more into the branches of the trees, and even on the streets you can tell that there's more texture on the ground as well. For those who like to shoot in night mode in really dark situations, you can actually do it in ultra wide mode and the 2 telephoto modes, so you also get that additional pro as well. For front facing, for me, Huawei wins. On the Samsung, it does try to expose my face a little bit too much, where I kind of look more like a ghost, and on the Huawei it looks more natural, even though it's a bit darker. Now moving on to video. For stabilization test, Samsung wins hands down, whether you're in the regular lens or the ultra wide lens. And of course, the Samsung has a super steady mode, so in all areas of stabilization, Samsung wins. On the Huawei, you can see the micro jitters, and when it's trying to stabilize, it kind of just jerks around and it's not like smooth or natural like the Samsung, so that's the biggest factor I can see. But when you're standing still and you're just moving the camera or panning around, they both do really great because you're not really moving that much. And for color wise, I would say it's the same as the pictures. Samsung is warm, Huawei is cooler. Now for low light video, it looks the best when you're standing still and panning around. I would say the sky is much more darker and looks a little bit cleaner on the Huawei, but the yellows on the natural yellow lights, we do see it more accurate on the Samsung. When you start walking, that's when you see a lot of micro jitters and the whole image gets blurry. I would say the Samsung still got the better stabilization, but both of these images really have so much micro jitters, it kind of just degrades the whole image. You can shoot in the ultra wide angle lenses, but they're not going to be as bright as the main cameras. And I gotta say that the Samsung ultra wide angle stabilization, I think is one of the best ones on any Android. So that is my comparison between the Huawei P30 and the Samsung S10e. For me, I gotta say the Huawei does take more pictures on the cooler side, warmer and saturated look on the Samsung. I do like the photography experience on the Huawei much better because you can shoot all the way from ultra wide down to telephoto, and you can also do macro shots as well. And for Samsung, I would say they are better at video than the Huawei. So let me know which one you guys think is better or which one you guys are planning to get. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.
Right.